It was a hot early summer day when the first reported sighting of the Dewey Lake Monster took place. The number one song in the nation was I Can't Stop Loving You by Ray Charles. John Kennedy was the President of the United States. The Vietnam War was escalating, and Gunsmoke was one of the most popular shows on television. There was talk of nuclear war and trips to outer space. All this while, Jimmy Andrew and Jeff Hall were played Army with Gary Lee and Al Johnson. As the day drew long, they eventually grew tired of fake killing one another and, more importantly, grew hungry, so they decided to take a break and eat the bologna and mustard sandwiches that Gary had brought in his Boy Scout backpack. The guys decided to race back down the hill to where Gary, had left the food. Jimmy and Jeff took one route while Gary and Al went a different path. But on the way down the hill, Jimmy and Jeff stumbled upon an early patch of raspberries. So, they stopped and began weaving their way between the briars, gobbling the berries as they went. Supposedly, Jimmy began gobbling and pushing Jeff in competition for the lion's share of the fruit. Jeff remarked that Jimmy suddenly froze and stood motionless. Jeff, thinking Jimmy was playing a prank, began to push him. He kept pushing him until Jimmy literally fell. Jeff then began making faces at what he thought was Jimmy's bad acting. The wind was blowing hard. It was blowing up dirt and weeds around, Jeff stated, and I am making fun of Jimmy when something blew in my eye, and then blew my Beetle Bailey hat off. I went chasing it through the grass. I almost walked into it. The thing that Jimmy was staring at. It was huge. I thought we were in big trouble, Jeff later told his uncle. Jeff stated that at first, the thing looked like a giant tree, Jeff recalled. I didn't know what I was looking at. But as Jimmy reportedly began crying, Jeff started screaming at the thing, or what looked like a werewolf. It had long German Shepherd-like features and a long snout with black, long claws. So I started barking at it, and I don't know why. I guess I was just scared crazy, Jeff stated. Jeff and Jimmy then both took off running. After some distance, approximately 20 yards away, the two stopped and looked back at the thing. Jeff asked Jimmy, "Is it real? It looks like a totem pole. Is it a totem pole?" This caused them both to start back at the thing, and then that's when this werewolf thing roared at them. It was so loud Jimmy screamed and then took off running like a jackrabbit. I remember thinking it was a cool-looking thing. It was like a red hairy creature of the Black Lagoon. But when it screamed and growled, I just remember running and Jimmy crying. Gary Lee recalled that when Jimmy and Jeff reached he and Al, they were both stone white and shaking, breathing hard. He stated at first we were confused and then started laughing at them because Jimmy had peed his pants. Al Johnson later told his aunt, "We heard a scream, and we thought it was just a crazy neighbor out there messing with us. But that scream was like something wrong." Jimmy was embarrassed and went home. Jeff kept talking about getting his 12 gauge with a modified choke and coming back to kill the wolf. The boys reportedly stopped hanging around with each other after the incident. One of the boys' uncles later recalled that they started accusing each other of making stuff up or being a coward or like that. But even years later, Jimmy swore he saw this giant wolf with an alligator belly and long legs. July 20th, 1962, to see a new mobile trailer their friend Kirk Stover from South Bend had brought there to camp. They were supposed to meet at 8 p.m., but Vinny and Willis had stopped off at a barbecue about a mile before, in Sister Lakes, and spent additional time there drinking and so forth. Eventually, they found Kirk's car with its new trailer park just off the road. But Kirk was not there. The trailer, however, was open. Vinny and Willis knocked and then slowly entered. Vinny stated they looked over the trailer and then opened a couple of beers and sat down. The trailer had been parked in an isolated section of the south side of the lake, so both Vinny and Willis knew Kirk would not be too far away. It was cool. I remember we had gone to Elkhart to look at that trailer before, but thought it was too expensive. We couldn't believe he bought it, Vinny recalled. Willis and Vinny waited for approximately 10 minutes and then started getting suspicious that something might be wrong. Around this time, they began to hear the crunch of leaves outside and initially thought it was Kirk approaching. Then suddenly, the trailer began to rock violently. Vinny said, "I thought we were going to tip over. I was thinking we were going to roll into the water," Vance recalled. "We just crawled out and spilled our beers. We jumped around outside looking." Vinny also remembered that. Then Kurt comes running up. When I saw him right away, I knew something was wrong. Willis said that all three stood outside the trailer trying to get it together. Vinny thought Kirk had been shaking the trailer, but I knew it was something else. Then, when we were standing there, a shadow passed by the light coming from the lake. Willis recalled that it was huge, absolutely humongous. I mean, big huge. All three of us saw it. We jumped. It went back down into the woods and disappeared. It looked like a giant wolf. Willis later reported and stated that he and Kirk told us that he had went outside because he thought we were messing with him. And that's when he was attacked. Kirk claimed that I couldn't see it at first. It threw me to the ground from behind. Then I'm being dragged toward the woods. I thought it was going to kill me, Kirk concluded. I thought I was being attacked by a bear or some sort of wolf creature, but when I tried to run is when I saw it. It was standing like a man and had back-bowed legs like a dog would, except it was standing on two legs. I don't know what that thing was. I definitely know it wasn't a bear, and I'm pretty sure wolves don't stand up on two legs, do they? Kirk later told authorities that the attack stopped when Vinny and Willis pulled up. I hate to think what would have happened to me if they never showed, he stated. Then I just hid and was quiet until I thought I could make a run for it back to the trailer. Vinny recalled, I don't know what it was, but it was powerful, man. It rocked that trailer around like a toy. I've never seen a wolf that big in my life, especially here in southwest Michigan. Derek was reportedly traumatized after the incident, and less than a month later, moved to Florida. Roger Long and Helen Borges of Chicago would usually spend at least 1 month of their summer in Sister Lakes, Michigan. They maintained a vacation home on Magician Lake, and they had recently purchased a new motorboat, which they were very excited to get out of the water. They put in on an early morning of August 15th, 1962. They took the boat from west to east across the lake. They toured around the northeast edge of the lake for a while in the early pre-dawn. The lake was quiet, and there were no other boats present as they made their way back and began navigating around the southwest side of the lake. In doing so, the couple passed a small couple of clusters of islands. As their boat made the loop north around the islands, Roger Long saw something swimming in the lake. It was big. At first I thought it was maybe a doe, but it was very thick and hairy, rolling up and down as it swam. Roger Long says he cut the motor and drifted, watching the thing as it approached the shore of Hemlock Island. As the sun came up, both Helen and Roger waited, staring at the trolling animal, which occasionally would disappear under the water. They hoped to get a better look as it should exit the water onto the shore. At first we thought it was neat, to see a wild animal swimming like that, but I also could not figure it because it seemed to be moving so fast. Moments later, they were horrified when the thing approaching the shore rose up out of the water and began walking like a man. It walked out of the water and straight up on shore. It was about twice the size of a full-grown man. It looked back at us and then disappeared into the woods. Roger Long reported the incident to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. We stared at it for a while, and neither one of us said anything. I thought maybe it was a trick our eyes were playing in the early sun, but it wasn't a trick. The weird thing is, it was a huge wolf-looking thing that was swimming around in the water, and as soon as it stood up, I knew something wasn't quite right. Afterwards, it stared back at us and shone its teeth in aggression. It had humongous teeth. I would say the fangs had to have been roughly 3 to 5 inches easily in length, while every other tooth was razor blade sharp. Its eyes glowed an orange too that we could see from roughly 50 to 100 yards away, and just stared at us for a while before walking off into the woods. I have never felt more dread in my life than when it looked at me. When returning to Chicago, Roger told his friend Mark Pulaski that after reaching the shore, the animal's skin shuddered and shook off the water pretty well. Pulaski became fascinated with the story and dedicated a certain amount of his time to the interest in the years afterward, including extensive research at MSU. He would frequently visit Long in Michigan in the years following their sighting. Roger would go out in the early morning and tool around Hemlock for many times after that. He always wanted to see it again, and so did I. I knew Helen and Roger well, and it was always one of the most exciting things either of them would talk about. In the fall of 1986, out near Manistee, Michigan, Ray Greenway was driving home from the Manistee Army recruiting station. It was late at night, and he noticed something in the darkened field beside him. His headlights were reflecting off what appeared to be eyes, but they were much too high off the ground to be a deer. Suddenly, the unidentifiable creature began running towards him and made an incredible leap across the two-lane road. There is no animal that it could be. I know that it was not a deer, Ray later recalled. He went on to describe its yellow eyes and impossible leaping ability. I do remember that I saw both eyes as if it were looking at me. The whole time, though, that, along with the leaping ability, is what I will never forget. Back in 1938, a 17-year-old man named Robert Fortney claimed that while standing near the Muskegon River in Paris, Michigan, he was confronted by a massive black dog. Fortney didn't report his encounter until 49 years later, but he swore the beast reared up on its hind legs and stared him down with piercing blue eyes. Terrified, he shot at the creature and it quickly fled. Fortney remained chilled by the event for years to come. However, he later stated that it may be that I was just scared, but I swear that dog was grinning at me. One particular memorable Dogman account came from a 13-year-old girl named Courtney, who lived out in Reed City, Michigan, back in '93. She decided to sneak out for a cigarette behind her family's house one winter, and she got the scare of her life. She claimed that a glint of light seeping out from the planks of an old abandoned barn got her attention. She followed its movement, and slowly it dawned on her that something was in there. She realized the 6-foot-tall thing hiding in the barn with the head of a dog was staring right at her. She ran off terrified. Later, her neighbor confirmed that they too saw a creature out in the barn that looked like a giant wolf. They described it as a buffalo-sized dog lurking in the barn. Rhonda, a resident of Three Lakes in Michigan, had a Dogman encounter in the fall of '09. She was traveling on US 41M with her son when the beast ran across the highway near Tioga Creek. We were very puzzled and thought it might be some mutant wolf and could not figure out what we witnessed. She went on to say that the beast ran fairly fast, about 50 feet in front of our truck. It was so strange because the front of it was much higher than the back and larger than a wolf. She claimed she'd never heard of Dogman until this incident. After reading descriptions and stories online, she was able to confirm for herself that the creature she encountered was indeed a Dogman. While driving on an isolated road in the Lansing, Michigan area in May of 2006, a man named Ron slowed down for what he thought was a deer. All of a sudden, a human-like hand, except much larger than a normal man's hand, reached over the edge of the hill, and this huge silhouette came into view. What came out of the darkened hillside was a massive man with a wolf-like face. It was much larger than a normal man, and it had a wolf-like face, and its eyes reflected in my headlights. It just sat there and looked across the field on the other side of the road, and then it just very calmly turned its head and looked right at me. At first, Chuck thought he spotted a moose as he approached the Nestoria Road in Baraga County, Michigan. It was a bit foggy and dewy that early morning in 2011, but Chuck knew he saw movement just off the edge of the road and into the woods. He stopped at the intersection, waited, watched, and nothing happened. As soon as he picked up speed to leave, the creature reemerged. Immediately, this animal ran out of the woods in front of my car and jumped across the road to the south side. I mean, it took 3 long strides and was gone, almost like it vanished through an invisible wall. In a state of shock, he observed the creature. He'd never seen anything like it. It was on all 4s and had back legs like those of a large man. It had jet black fur and looked like a very large wolf, other than the back legs and the human-like rump. There was no tail. The profile of the head and snout were that of a wolf, and it didn't make a sound. We were just talking about general things, and there was a small truck in front of us. No other traffic on the road in either direction. The road itself was mostly clear, but did have areas of snow and ice spots. The weather was cold, but there was no snow falling, and it was a cloudless night. We saw a large, tall, dark, and oddly shaped creature run out from the left side of the overpass and hit the rear quarter panel of the small truck in front of us, causing the truck to fishtail. Luckily, the small pickup did regain control, but it didn't stop to see what collided with it. If anything, it seemed to speed up as if it got a view of what hit it and wanted to get the hell out of Dodge. It looked like a giant dog or wolf. It was bipedal and not on all 4s. It was at least 7.5 feet tall roughly. It had kind of a mane around its head, much like that of a lion, and the hind legs looked like dog legs when they are up on 2 legs. Like the knees are backwards, which seemed to be more pronounced as it was running across the 2-lane highway left to right. The front legs were swinging freely as it ran. The face was definitely canine, much like a collie face, elongated with a snout and a nose protruding from the face. The mouth was slightly open as it ran, and the creature was covered by longish dark hair, but varying in lengths. It had pointy ears that seemed to be more on the top portion of its head rather than the sides. We watched as it ran off to the right side of the highway and disappeared into the small trees and weeds along the road. It seemed to pay us no heed whatsoever, as if it was unconcerned that we were fast approaching. I kept driving but was silent, and I asked her, "Did you just see that?" And she said yes. We drove the next 10 minutes in total silence until we got to my driveway. We went to my house and I made us some tea. We sat and discussed what we had seen, and I'm not sure if it was a relief to have the other confirm what was seen, but we agreed on all aspects that I described. I was concerned about her trip back to her house, as she naturally was. So we decided she would call me from her cell phone, and we would talk as she drove, so if anything happened, I would know as it happened, and she gave me frequent location updates as she drove. Thankfully, she made it home without incident. Our encounter was brief, but it was fully illuminated, affording us a good profile view of the creature. We have always heard the stories, but normally from someone who knew someone who knew someone that saw something. Now I can honestly say we saw something, and it wasn't a man in a costume, that's for sure, nor a large dog, nor a wolf. It was just a dog man. I can still see it clearly in my mind's eye, like it just happened last week. I guess I should start this by saying that the only people who know about this incident is my immediate family, my fiance, who's encouraged me to contact people, and the person who witnessed this with me. This happened back in 2001. I was only 8 years old at the time, and my friend who was with me was 7 at the time. We were both very small. I remember it was early August, and I live in a semi-inner city in Michigan, next to a very large park. At the time, my friend and I had decided it was a great idea to play in my very big backyard at night. Just because the neighbors had a bonfire going, it just barely lit that portion of my yard through a bunch of trees. We had climbed onto the shed via the neighbor's fence and a propped board. I mention this because it's nearly impossible to climb to this day being an adult. Anyway, we had our feet dangling off the shed with our backs facing toward the park. And without a word, my friend had jumped off the highest part of our shed, which we were never able to do. I mean, he practically flew and headed straight for the house. After a few long seconds, I turned around to see why he ran, and there was this thing. It looked half dog and half human. There's really no other way to describe it. It had been over 8 feet high, which is the height of the shed, and its reaching length was over 4 feet long. Its ears alone had been a foot long at least, and its eyes did that thing a cat's eyes do when lights reflect on them in the dark. Its hand was inches away from my ankle. Very, very hairy body. It was basically a dog. I don't exactly remember the color of it, if it even had a color, but I do remember that whatever this was standing from the ground because we didn't have a chain link fence. It was all parallel wood that you couldn't stand on. And it was massive, so tall that I could literally see from its middle torso up. That was literally the fastest I've ever rolled away, and I don't even remember how I got down looking back. I ran inside and told our parents. We had no idea what it was at the time, so I vaguely remember telling my mom that there was a tall man outside with very hairy arms and big ears. All of the adults went outside really quick to check, but I guess they never found a thing. To this day, I'm still afraid of the fact that even if what I saw was a man in a very elaborate A-movie horror costume, I was still almost abducted. Since then, my mom has become a bit of a fanatic about it. It's caused me a lot of anxiety problems. My friends and I never mentioned it after that night, and since we've grown apart. It was summertime. My childhood had a great group of normal, everyday kids, and we played war a lot with each other. Normally, about 6 of us played together through the day, with kids rotating back home for chores, etc. This particular Saturday, though, we decided to play war behind the Alto Elementary School in the woods and creek area. Anyways, I was trying to get into the woods ahead of the other kids before they showed up. To have the advantage, of course. We were using squirt guns and water balloons, and it was like 10 a.m. at this point, so as soon as I ran into the woods, which I knew very well, this was my stomping grounds, literally, I felt uneasy, like I was being watched, and not by a friend either. This feeling lingered and got stronger and stronger, like whatever was watching me was moving closer. In this small stretch of woods, there was a creek behind me that ran the stretch of the woods. There was a train, railroad tracks as well. I was crouched in the tall grass facing the playground and the road when I heard a splash and a very fast movement going on behind me. I jumped because I was startled at the height and suddenness of the shadow flashing behind me. When I ripped around, I saw a large, black-gray, wolf-like creature that was running down the creek bed alongside the creek behind me. It was shifting from 4 to 2 legs and jumped after about 3 seconds into the brush away from me and to the trees. It seemed to have disappeared, and I didn't hear it anymore. I was a country woodsy kid anyway. I had no comprehension other than fear for what I saw at that moment. I ran home, which wasn't far, roughly about 1/4 of a mile. I didn't tell anybody what I saw. I was afraid of being teased or made fun of about it by other people. When I ran in my house and got to my bedroom, it had only been a few minutes, but I remember thinking that it resembled the werewolves in the Howling movie I had seen a few years before. It was, I'd guess, 7 to 8 feet tall and very muscular, maybe 300 pounds. Its head resembled that of a timber wolf, with long canines, long clawed hands, and its legs bent backwards like a canine. It glanced back at me. It didn't want me to see it. It didn't smell at all. Its face was not feral or ferocious. Its eyes were actually like a stinging blue, but its presence was powerful and overwhelming. I didn't go out of my own yard for several days, which my neighborhood friends thought that was odd. I had childhood asthma though, so they assumed that was my issue when they didn't see me much. I used that excuse when my family wondered why I was so homebound. I never told a soul what I saw for fear of not being believed. I stayed close to my friends when we played, but I didn't go close to that creek stretch of woods for 3 to 4 years and never alone. Being an 11-year-old kid then, I remember thinking about quite a bit over the summer, but fear of not being believed kept me from telling my friends and family about what happened behind the school I attended. I was glad that middle school was coming for me that fall. I remember my concern that I was going to see this creature elsewhere that we played in Alto. but I didn't. Over the next few years, I rationalized to myself that I didn't really know what I saw, and the wolf-like creature imaged in my memory was better left there. Flash up to 2008. I'm 33 years old. My profession at this time was professional fitness training, and recreational bodybuilding was basically my lifestyle. We resided in a quaint house about a mile north of Lowell, Michigan. It had a very pretty welcoming woodsy area behind our home, and we all enjoyed it, walking the trails in the woods and just enjoying the trees and the outside life. It's wintertime 2009. It's a blizzard and snow outside at this point. All of my family was sound asleep. About 1 a.m., we wake up to a large thud sound on the roof of our home, like the weight of a person moving around on the roof of our one-story home. There's a lot of scraping noises and a slow, deliberate walking sound. Now this goes on for about a minute. My girlfriend, our children, and myself are genuinely spooked by this phenomenon happening on the roof. I recall vividly that all of us were utterly silent, huddled in the hallway looking intently at each other, and up at the ceiling from all the loud creaking and scraping noises that we kept hearing. I don't own guns, but I certainly felt it was a good idea to grab my machete that was in the closet. That was when I realized the dread feeling in my gut was the exact same feeling I had years ago with the wolf-like creature from my youth. As I struggled with this realization, I quietly as possible crept up to the back slider door, machete in hand. I had genuine fear for my girlfriend and children, but kept it to myself. They were still huddled and scared, watching me sneak outside. Please know that I'm a rather fearless man for the most part. I ever so quietly snuck outside. Now at this point it's snowing hard with big flakes, and it's eerily quiet. I'm crouched in my pajamas alongside back side of the house. I'm holding my breath, looking up at the roof, listening. Slowly, the clawed hands and timber wolf face with the piercing blue eyes I know too well peers over the roof down at me. It's the exact same creature I saw. We stared at each other blankly for a few seconds. There definitely was a weird sense of recognition between the creature and me in those moments. I was physically frozen and shocked because the creature was only a good 8 feet or so from me and on the roof of my home. It suddenly leaps off the roof about 30 feet into our backyard. It lands on all fours and then runs on 2 legs back into the tree line in what seems to be a blur. It's standing there at the tree line looking right at me. The contrast of the snow and its size and fur make it so easy to spot. I hold still while the wolf-like creature and myself stare each other down. We stared at each other for, I'm guessing, a minute. In that minute, my adrenaline dumped. My fear of this creature turned to anger for it disturbing my life, my family. I made a decision as my anger grew, a reckless one. I yelled a loud, angry noise and charged, machete in hand, directly at it. Pathetically, it took me like 15 seconds to run the distance the creature had in like 2 moments. The wolf-like creature didn't budge, move, or anything. It just stood there watching me run at it. It appeared mildly amused, and its facial expression was almost a smirk. As I got within about 30 feet, in my head loudly, I hear audibly, "Don't!" It's a deep, loud voice. I swear the sheer volume of the voice stopped me dead in my run at the creature. I was instantly physically calm, confused, still afraid of the creature. My fear of it was different for me. Its presence was still overwhelming to me, and at this moment I realized that this creature is intelligent. I dropped the machete in a physical plea, a gesture to not be harmed. I backed away in slow, deliberate steps, backwards, still facing it. If it chose to be violent, it could have easily killed and harmed me from physical appearance of it. After a few seconds, it turned and walked calm, about 30 feet into the woods. Its presence faded, and it felt like it wasn't ever there. I went back to my residence, looking over my shoulder the whole time. I was just so bewildered. It was a very vivid, surreal feeling. My reality had been spun like a top. I go back inside, but I keep looking out the slider towards the woods, and I tell my girls that it's gone. My girlfriend, 31, and her daughter, who's 10 and 11, walk into the dining room area from the hallway, asking questions in quiet, hushed tones. I hug our daughters, telling them that it's late. It was just an animal that ran off. They reluctantly buy it. My girlfriend and I whisper about what happened earlier. It comes out that she saw it a month or so before, which then clicked to me. She had called me while I was running errands early evening. She sounded upset and scared. I was at the store, which is only a mile from our residence. I was home in like 3 minutes. When I got in the house, she said she lied and chalked it off to the neighbor's big Rottweiler. That was when I admitted my knowledge of the creature. Our daughter slept, but we really didn't. It was simply a crazy, crazy experience.